Well, as the rest of us try our best to understand why the gunman did it, the left decided within hours who they wanted to blame: middle American gun owners. Late-night comedians and politicians like Hillary Clinton accused the NRA and its members of responsibility for Stephen Paddock's rampage. Progressive thought leaders like Michael Moore and Bret Stephens of the New York Times called for a repeal of the Second Amendment. Left-wing politicians and gun groups immediately began fundraising off the massacre. Did any of that save a single life? Did it make you safer? Don Calloway is a Democrat, a former state legislator from the state of Missouri, and he joins us tonight. So, Don, I want to ask you, thanks for joining us, the question that I've asked everyone I've talked to this week on both sides, and it's this. So, hours after this happened, you heard people, armchair analysts, say, this is a result of inaction. We could have stopped this. We chose not to because of political pressure from the National Rifle Association. But we need to summon the political will to prevent this. So this question is really simple. What should we have done to prevent this massacre, the one we saw in Vegas, the biggest in 100 years? What should we have done?
Even Tucker, at the end of the day, mass shootings are a result of the types of weapons that are available to our society and the lethality of those weapons that are available to our society. I don't know that any one gun control proposal eliminates the possibility of mass shootings, just like no one Homeland Security proposal eliminates entirely the possibility of terrorism on our country, and this was indeed an act of domestic terrorism. However, it is absolutely unacceptable at this point in our country's history to just be satisfied with the idea of an annual macabre death march, each year more grisly than the next. The inaction at this point is fairly despicable.
Okay, so you're getting right again to the question, but I'm searching for an answer. So you said this is the result of inaction. And I don't want to speak in generalities. I want to speak in hard specifics. Right, what laws would have prevented what we saw on Sunday? Please, please.
First of all, we need a serious consideration of limiting magazine sizes. We also need serious consideration about a federal standard which tracks the transfer of every weapon in this country, particularly those of the machine gun variety. If this young man had, not young man, but if this gentleman had a federal standard which tracked the type of weapons he was amassing, he would have drawn some attention to himself long before he was able to amass the deadly arsenal that he did. This is a very reasonable proponent. You've got two suggestions. I'm not saying nothing about. That's
no, I'm not
arguing
with you. I just want to. Let's just start with those two really quick. So take the first one first. You said we need to limit magazine size. There are about 60 million large capacity magazines in circulation in the United States. 60 million in a country, of 320 million. What do you do with those magazines? Should we take them away from people?
No, I didn't say that whatsoever, but I do think that we should, at this point, limit the size that can be manufactured from now going forward. The 1986 gun law limited the manufacture of automatic weapons of a certain variety altogether, and the mass shootings, as a result, plummeted. We've seen the Australian laws in which these military-style.
I'm sorry.
We've seen the.
No, it's not. What's funny is your total misstatement of fact that didn't happen.
Tucker, it's very difficult to make reasonable arguments when you keep interrupting me, man. It did happen in Australia.
But that's not a reasonable argument. It's false.
Tucker, you're asking me what we can do, and I'm giving you answers. I also think that we could. Again, so let's focus on the second solution that I proposed, which was to put a serious federal standard around the tracking of every transfer of high volume machine gun style weapons. There's no reason that a gentleman like this can amass a deadly military volume arsenal and not having been tracked at any point.
So what does that mean? So he bought these weapons to the extent we know where he got them.
Everyone, somebody would have
let me just finish my question. But somebody did know. The U.S. government knows, the Justice Department knows, whenever you buy a weapon legally from a federal firearms license holder, you go through a background check. He did. So the government knew that he had these weapons.
Not if you buy it from a gun show, Tucker. It's called the gun show loophole.
But he
that is another reasonable gun reform.
You're speaking out of ignorance. He didn't buy them at gun shows.
Some gun. Tucker, it is not accurate to say that every time you buy a gun, you have to go through a background check. You can buy them at gun shows with no background check
whatsoever. Stop filibustering and answer my question. This guy bought the guns that we know that he bought legally. Okay, so for the guns that we have
That's
tracked
right.
to their origin, they were all purchased legally, and he went through a background check in each case. He had no felony record, and no mental illness on record, and so he was allowed to buy them. So the government did know. What should the government have done at that point?
Tucker, a federal standard for tracking the firearms of high velocity that every American owns
But
and
what
that
does that
are sold.
mean?
The government.
What does that mean?
I'm trying to explain. If I could explain, Tucker, we knew that he bought them, yes, and he bought them legally, yes. There is no uniform federal standard for tracking who owns these weapons and how many they have. If there was such a standard, we would have seen the Department of Justice and the ATF would have been tipped off that this gentleman was absolutely amassing an arsenal, and they could have had reasonable probability to ask him questions about why and what he was doing. And that,
So
that
are
was
you
not
saying,
there.
are you saying
that was not there, and
well,
as a
it was
result, this
there.
gentleman was able to kill 59
It's hard to
people.
argue
No,
with
it
somebody who
wasn't,
doesn't know
Tucker.
anything. But let me,
Tucker,
I'm just
there
trying to
was
get to the
no-
very
Tucker,
specifics
don't be
here.
disrespectful. Don't be disrespectful.
Well, no, I'm
There was
being sincere.
There's no
You-
universal tracking.
Okay.
No, there's no tracking.
So what is the
standard in place.
tracking you're proposing? This is probably the last gun control segment I'm ever going to do because it's too frustrating, but I want you to be very specific. If you buy over a certain number of guns, does that mean you believe the government should be, law enforcement should be required to go to your house and talk to you, follow you, put you under surveillance? What are you talking about specifically?
As I said in the last section in which I tried to answer, if we are to allow the purchase of high-velocity machines which are used exclusively for the efficient killing of mass numbers of humans, it is a reasonable gun control measure to track how many of these one person owns.
But what does that
and to
mean,
track?
track? Does it mean put them under surveillance? What does it mean? What are you talking about?
Tucker, the government knows how many cars I own. I have to register them. I have to report them.
But what should they do about it?
The government
he already had background checks already.
We can know how many you.
But
why do you own
know.
56? Tucker, stop. This is just being, it's not productive. So let's go to the next question.
No, but you're not answering my question, which is what should the government
Because
then
you're
do?
not allowing
We know
me, and
how
it's not being productive, Tucker. What we know is at this point that we have allowed ourselves to end the gun control debate in this country. There is no
Stop.
debate.
This is just propaganda. You don't have a real answer. I'm too literal for conversations like this. It's too dumb. I'm asking you, what does it mean to...
The gun debate is over in this country.
Got it done. I've had enough. This is not useful at all. Thank you for joining us.